We are in a relatively brief period of time going to talk about a whole bunch of important things: the future of democracy, the future of America, Russia, a couple other countries maybe as well. But I want to start with you just on the events of the past week. In his extraordinary presentation in the Senate, Brett Kavanaugh said that the, quote, political hit job, end quote, directed at him was being done on behalf of the Clintons, among other people. Your response?
I mean, really, yes, it deserves a lot of laughter. I wasn't watching when he said that. I was having to be somewhere else and away from a TV and even my phone. And so I heard about it later. And, you know, look, I thought it was just part of the whole of his very defensive and unconvincing presentation. And I told someone later, boy, I'll tell you, they give us a lot of credit. 36 years ago, we started this against him. I mean, it is...
Back at Yale.
Yeah, well, even before, in high school, apparently. So I don't, you know, look, I want the FBI to conduct as thorough an investigation as they possibly can within whatever restraints are imposed upon them. But I think for anyone who believes there's such a thing as a judicial temperament and that we want judges, particularly those on our highest court, to approach issues, approach plaintiffs and defendants with a sense of fairness, that there's a lot to be concerned about.
Right. I want to ask you a question about Dr. Ford for a minute. There are a lot of Democrats who, and a lot of other people, who are absolutely certain, 100%, her recollection is the absolute truth. I'm asking this as a lawyer. Do you feel 100% certain that the events that she described are true and are therefore disqualifying?
Look, I watched as much of her testimony as I could. I found her very credible. You have to ask yourself, why would anybody put themselves through this if they did not believe that they had important information to convey to the Senate? She basically said that. She thought it was her civic duty. So I found her presentation, I found her willingness to say, I don't remember that, but I remember this, to be very convincing. And I felt a great swell of, you know, pride that she would be willing to put herself out there under these circumstances.
Can you frame this a little bit in the context of what we're all seeing as, or understanding to be, almost a war developing between the genders, or between large factions of gender? Women's anger, of course, has become an enormous issue. Just frame that out against the backdrop of some of your own experiences in dealing with it being the first major party female candidate for president.
Well, I wouldn't frame it so starkly as you just did. I think what is happening is that on many, many fronts, women and young women and girls are saying, you have to hear our stories too. We have the right to be heard. And I remember those, we saw it all on TV, those two young women following Senator Flake into the elevator. And they were determined that he would know that there were young women like them, representing many, many more, who wanted to be heard and wanted their stories to be taken seriously. So I don't see it so much as some kind of conflict as finally righting the balance, because there's been a tremendous imbalance on women's lives, women's narratives. They've been historically dismissed, condescended to. I have a chapter in my book about being a woman in politics, and it's not just about me, it's about a lot of other women who find themselves picked apart, second-guessed, held to a double standard, and at some point it just is time to say, enough. You know, we want to be judged on our merits. We want to have as much right to our agency, to our autonomy as we should be able to have. So it's trying to get back to, or maybe for the first time, get to a balance where women's lives are valued as much as men's lives, their stories are as important as men's stories, they are written into history, not out of history. So that's what I see happening. Right. And of course there's some anger and frustration, but that's the core of it.
There's